And we're back like we never left. Oregon fans, what's going on? How we living? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres with ScoopDuck on 3. It is Wednesday, June 12th, 2024, coming to you from Long Beach, California. Got another big episode of the pod in store for you today, as I am joined by Justin Hopkins to break down Oregon's newest commitment in the 2025 recruiting class. But before that, the Ducks Dish podcast is brought to you in part by Ranchito Grill in Springfield. Not sure what your dinner plans are tonight, but head on over to Ranchito at 1537 Mohawk Boulevard. Try their homemade tortillas. They got great food, a great environment, and they will take care of you. Say what's up to my guy Ruben and let him know that Max Torres sent you. Like I mentioned, guys, big episode of the pod today as the Ducks land 2025 Bellevue, Washington offensive lineman Demetri Manning, their second commitment in 2 days or in as many days. Justin, we are back on the pod to break it all down. How are you doing?
Great, doing great so far. Excited to have some commits to talk about. Makes our jobs a little bit easier and gets fans a little bit more excited too.
No doubt, no doubt. This is a fun time. Like you said before, it's fun when there's something to cover, and especially with July being a dead period, I'm just trying to lean into as much as I can of everything that's happening now. So, Alik Terry and the Ducks add another offensive lineman, one of the top, probably the top offensive lineman in the Pacific Northwest. Just to kind of get us going here, Justin, what were your reactions to this addition?
I think, like everybody else, I'm not going to sit here on this podcast and be like, oh man, they smashed it. This guy's totally underrated. Like, this is a 5-star diamond in the rough. I don't know that that's necessarily the case. But what I do think is a couple things. First off, you're back in Seattle, taking another guy that the Washington Huskies would have totally loved to have. So that's a win in itself right there. Secondly, you're keeping what we'll kind of just call that in-state talent close to home. I know Seattle's not the state of Oregon, but you get my point with that. Oregon has really set up shop, obviously, when there's any talent in Oregon, but in Seattle and Northern California for sure. And so far, Southern California for the most part. So, keeping those guys at Oregon is always a win. If you're going to take a projectable, if you're going to take a development guy, you usually can't go wrong on the line of scrimmage. We look at Manning, and I think what really stuck out to me, and I know we'll get into it, but from the evaluation from QB11 is just that this is a young man that's committed himself to, slimming down and trimming down and making his body, his physique a little bit better. And I think the more in shape that Manning can make himself. Now, he's never going to have a 6-pack. Okay. He's never going to be that guy on the beach, and that's okay. The one term, and I know it's not the most, popular term, but you kind of trim in the baby fat, if you will. It's just a really big human being that's probably learning more about nutrition and how to take care of his body, and the impacts it'll have on him. So you look at Manning, and maybe he can get himself to around that 330 mark, somewhere around there. I think that's a reasonable playing weight for him, and it will be better on his body. It will make him more agile. So we know he's got power. You can see in these videos, he's got plenty of power. He can knock guys back. So I think there's a lot to like there. I think this is a projectable, but I've said this already. I'll say it again. Adding Manning when you already have Addison definitely makes that commit list look better. Manning just on his own would be like, okay, we at least got the offensive line class started. Here we go. But when you have Manning and you have Addison already on the list, it's kind of like, all right, that's a pretty darn good foundation for a good offensive line class. Let's see what else they add to it. So I do like the direction that the class is going for the offensive line group. And like I said, I think the addition of Manning makes Addison look better, and the commitment of Addison makes this Manning addition look better.
You mentioned the eval, Justin, on Demetri Manning, who told me that his latest height and weight was 6'7", 345 pounds. So just a mammoth human being is kind of what we've been talking about when we're talking about Demetri Manning. Wanted to take a little bit of time here just and read QB11's awesome eval. that our subscribers over at ScoopDuck got access to first, just because I think he does a great job breaking guys down. Sometimes he has awesome comparisons. So just going to read this, but you can read it over at scoopduck.com if you haven't already. So he said, the heater continues for Coach Alik Terry as he looks to build momentum toward a strong offensive line class to go with what I feel is an underrated 2024 crop, this time staying in the Pacific Northwest and snagging Seattle's best O-line prospect. Manning is a mammoth prospect that has really retooled his body in the last 12 months. Even seeing photos of him recently on visits to Oregon and Washington, I have been impressed with how trim he looks. Manning has exceptional length and truly a monstrous frame. Huge bubble in size through the lower half make for even a slimmed and trimmed version weighing in well over 325 pounds. Athletically, Manning shows flashes of good hip roll and short area quickness. My biggest critique is that during his junior season, he was carrying substantially more bad weight and didn't display the best athletic body control or coordination on a down-to-down basis. Frankly, this is to be expected for a 16 to 17-year-old 6'7", 360 kid. The requisite strength through the core to control that kind of mass takes time to develop. That's why I'm so encouraged seeing him be proactive about trimming down so he can be built properly in a college weight program. That kind of commitment and discipline for a high school kid is a very good indicator of high football character. Playing in a wing T system at Bellevue High School, we don't get a lot of opportunities to see Manning mirror and redirect and pass pro, but frankly, he will be moving inside in college, and the technical side of his game will require development, as is the case with all O-line prospects. This is a nice interior offensive line pickup and a guy due to his physical gifts who projects as a road grading guard at some point down the line. Manning has nice clay to mold, and I'm very much looking forward to watching him develop. Go Ducks! QB 11. So yeah, some really good detailed analysis there from QB. I think I was really intrigued to read it and get his thoughts, Justin, because I saw him in Seattle at the Under Armour camp, and I was like, well, this guy's huge, but maybe he doesn't move quite the best. So obviously it's more than just meets the eye. He did do really, really well in the one-on-ones during that portion of the camp that I was able to see him, and he plays with some fire, that's for sure. And he's got some really violent hands and plenty of power. So really seeing how mobile they can get him, I think that's really the next step in his game, and it's going to tell us where he ultimately, stacks up once he gets to the college level. So I think you and I can both agree this maybe isn't an early contributor, but certainly someone that I think can be a key piece moving down the line.
Yeah, and that's the key. I mean, there are guys that you recruit in every recruiting cycle, no matter where you're at, including Georgia, Ohio State, whoever, that are developmental guys and guys that are a little bit more ready-made to play right away. So, it's okay to have a combination of both. In fact, that's what you need. You can't just kind of like keep pushing guys out and putting freshmen in their place. It doesn't work. So, give Manning the chance to come in, continue to reshape his body. What he's doing on his own, dropping 40 pounds or whatever and getting older, they'll bring him in and be able to get more strength and drop his weight in the process of that, which will make him an even better and more flexible player. So tons of upside. Like I said, it's not a hidden gem 5-star, but it's a guy that, okay, I feel okay with this pick, knowing that basically the Seattle Washington Huskies weren't able to keep him, and Oregon's got a chance to bring him in and develop. Like I said, I'll say it again, but Oregon's going to will have to go into the transfer portal for offensive linemen in this cycle. So, we put this kind of maybe with that and assuming, okay, there's going to be guys that do come in ready to play, and then there's going to be guys that come in and have a chance to develop. And Manning, definitely falls under that latter umbrella, which is a great thing for him.
And that's why you recruit both, some guys that can play right away, or you hope they play right away. They don't always play right away. And then ones that are going to get developed. And then you have the transfer portal to kind of lean on. But you obviously don't want it to be an over-reliance. And I don't think Oregon has fallen under that category in any regard, Justin. So we started off a little bit flipped order to what I usually do, but I'm all about it. We got into the eval part first, but now let's get into some more of our analysis, the recruiting impact on the trail, and a little bit more of the story, because I'll be honest, Justin, this is a guy I didn't know a whole lot about a month and a half-ish ago. And now I've talked to him what feels like a million times. And I got that exclusive interview with him before he committed. So we had that ready for our readers over at ScoopDuck to detail his decision. And man, this guy is an awesome interview, Justin. I don't know if you've had a chance to talk to him before, but he's got a bunch of great energy. He talked about just how much he loves the camaraderie at Oregon and how that was a huge, huge box that he wanted to see checked going into that official visit, just how close the offensive line unit was. But he said he loves Dan Lanning. He loves Mike Cavanaugh. Mike Cavanaugh was actually a guy who got particular shout outs or a lot of praise from Demetri Manning during this recruitment and Malik Terry, of course. So this is a guy that said he grew up as the only Duck fan in the house. So that was kind of cool. He said that he kind of knew he wanted to be a Duck from when he got that offer just about a year ago, Justin. So this is a move that he said he thinks he waited too long to make. But, he ended up in Eugene after official visits to Washington and UCLA. He told me he was going to be canceling his upcoming official visits to Arkansas and Miami now that he's committed to Oregon. But you're able to keep him away from Washington, who's your rival, and now they're going to be in the Big Ten with you as well. And you keep fortifying the trenches. So now we're starting to see some good momentum along the offensive line, which I feel like every time I check our boards over at ScoopDuck, people are talking about it. So I think this is definitely a commitment at a position that the Duck fans definitely wanted.
Yeah. And, in my experience, the guys that have grown up loving Oregon in that way, typically a lot of the in-state kids, Brady Breeze or Justin Herbert, Chase Cota, some of those guys that are recent, when those guys grow up loving Oregon in that way, they tend to play just a little bit harder. They practice a little harder. They don't skip out. They tend to be great leaders on the team. Just some of those really important qualities that aren't athletically related. So, that's one thing that I think Manning will bring to the table. Yes, he didn't grow up in the state of Oregon, but obviously he's really close to the state of Oregon, has watched Oregon probably as closely as anybody in the state of Oregon growing up. And so, to me, that's almost like an in-state, home state kid staying home and playing with some pride for the program. And, those are things that I've always seen that pay off really well. Doesn't mean he's going to be a superstar first rounder, but that's a guy that you're going to feel comfortable putting out there on the line when you need him, whether it's starting, whether it's, filling in, whether it's subbing for a down, for a series, for a quarter, whatever the case might be. So, lots to like about Manning. And those are in today's transfer portal world, those are the kind of guys that kind of help keep the glue together. They're the glue that kind of keeps everybody grounded and maybe not jumping in the portal. You need some of those guys in each position group. So really like the Manning edition. And like you said, he's shutting everything down. So also kind of like that part of his recruitment as well.
No doubt. No doubt. And he's someone that is going to be bringing a whole lot of confidence with him to Oregon. Like I said, we got the interview talking about why he chose the Ducks, and he's heading to Oregon with some pretty high hopes. Just to read off of his read off my story here, he said, "quote This 2025 Oregon class is going to be good. We're definitely going to be that group that definitely wins that Joe Moore Award on the offensive line. Our group is definitely going to be some sort of a part of the national championship run in the upcoming years, and that's something I can promise you." So that's something that I know always gets fans fired up when the Duck fans talk about, when the Duck recruits rather talk about winning that first ever national championship in Eugene. So I think just looking kind of more big picture, Justin, at the Manning edition, the Addison edition, you get some really nice momentum in what has really become a defining month on the recruiting calendar. Obviously, November, December, that's even more important. But at that point, most of the time, it's about hanging on and just keeping the guys that you have in the fold. But this is where you're really looking to capitalize and ultimately close with a lot of your top targets in the month of June. Typically, the way things have seen, the way they've worked is you bring a guy in for multiple unofficial visits and then you get him back for an official visit. And that's usually when you try to seal the deal and then get him back for a game later in the season. So I think when you get a guy like Zaire Addison, who told me he tried to commit before previously, but he wanted to just have all of his family on board and with them when he got to make that decision. I don't know. That was a little bit of a surprise for me because one of the questions that I wrote in a piece over the weekend was, how much does Zaire Addison actually like Oregon? And Not that I had any doubt that he liked Oregon, but he was working from a top 9. Definitely a guy that I got the feel really loved the recruiting process. So, saying great things about every school after each visit. But Addison really feels like the guy that you can build this offensive line group around. And the Ducks keep strengthening their ties in Florida. Like that's huge, huge, huge news. But it's going to be a battle until the very end.
Well, and now, with Addison and Manning, Alik Terry and Mike Cavanaugh. And again, I think folks forget Mike Cavanaugh's got a really impressive resume doing what he's done for a long time. So you're talking about one of the best, O-line assistants or GAs or offensive analysts, whatever. That's one of the best in the country at that position. Cavanaugh's done it a long time, and Oregon's pretty fortunate that, that's the guy that really wants to stay in this area because of family, because of his grandchildren. He wants to be around them. So Oregon's really scoring big there with Cavanaugh, and I know you mentioned him in the recruitment of Manning. But I think what I wanted to say is having Addison and Manning committed takes a heap of pressure off Alik Terry. He's certainly got more work to do. There's no doubt about that, and they could definitely do well adding some bigger names or maybe a Michael Fasusi or whatever the case might be. But this takes an absolute ton of pressure off of him, knowing that he's probably got to sign 4 to 5 guys, potentially maybe 6. I doubt 6, but 4 to 5 guys in this cycle. And now you have 2. You're halfway there, if you will, with Addison and Manning. So I'm not saying they can be super selective, but they can be a bit more selective moving forward in that position group, which really allows you to focus your efforts on a smaller group, which is nice. You can really, if you've got 4 or 5 guys that you're recruiting versus a dozen, you can spend a lot more time on those guys. So, those are the good things. And there's no doubt. I know Duck fans feel this way, and I agree. This is a really important offensive line cycle for Oregon. So, Alik Terry needs to take the foundation he's got now and continue building on that moving forward.
And I like how you talked about being selective, Justin, because that's something that I think some fans don't think about quite as much as you and I do. So when somebody doesn't commit to Oregon, they're just looking at it like, oh my God, I can't believe the Ducks missed out on this guy. When, we'll tell them probably after the fact, but it's like, hey, maybe this guy wasn't a take at the time. And that's a luxury. Not every program has that. And that's something that Oregon has earned because of what they've done on the field, because of the culture that they've instilled, and just everything humming the way that it is right now. So some really good thoughts there just about Addison and kind of the overall projection of this offensive line. The Ducks also hosted Austin Pay, a big offensive lineman out of Utah. If you haven't gone over to see his official visit recap video, you definitely should, because it's just fun to see the creative team and what they do. Dan Lanning's looking super swaggy with the shades, just feeling himself in that video. So I always like seeing those videos, Justin, because that's kind of the most inside look we get sometimes at these recruitments. So let's see what else we got here. We're talking some Oregon football recruiting on the ScoopDuck YouTube channel on a Wednesday morning. Make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It has been growing at a great rate, and we really appreciate the support. Justin, the next topic we can get into is what's next, right? Because Oregon fans always want to know what's next. It's a very short-lived celebration at times, and it looks like one of Oregon's top targets is set to come off the board tomorrow, and that was a bit of a juicy development kind of in the past couple of days and over the weekend, if we wanted to just shed some light there.
Yeah, 4-star linebacker Mason Poza, who I assume that's who you're talking about, but I'm pretty sure. I was going to echo this after your last comment, because I believe, and you believe, Oregon postponed his visit. He was supposed to take an official visit to Oregon this past weekend. It didn't happen. He went to Wisconsin instead and visited there. Oregon was kind of in a spot, do we push real hard here? Do we wait? How long do we wait? Because they do a really good job putting themselves in the mix for a lot of really good football players. And at the end of the day, Dan Lanning does have some tough decisions to make. They do have to let some of these guys know that maybe they just don't have the room that they need for them. And the crazy part is, you think about, for example, a guy like Mason Poza. just to show you the difference, this is a guy that Washington would be absolutely giddy to land, right? And Oregon's basically kind of saying we're not totally sure that we could be move forward with you here. And Wisconsin's done a great job recruiting him, so I'm not trying to take that away. But both you and I believe that Poza will likely commit to Wisconsin on Thursday. The visit to Oregon didn't take place. I do believe all of that was basically at Oregon's discretion. I think he's a good player. I think he's a great player. I think most years this would be a guy that Oregon would pounce all over. But, we kind of just, we kind of have to trust Dan Lanning and Marshall Malco and the staff on what they're doing and the guys that they feel confident in because, again, this isn't like, hey, we're going to have to go take a backup now because Mason Posa is going to Wisconsin. I believe they clearly have some other things in the picture that they're feeling confident on. And so I do believe Oregon could get themselves there to be the team for Mason Posa, but I do fully expect he probably ends up at Wisconsin, on Thursday when he makes his commitment. Really good player. I could see him being highly productive at Wisconsin, so that's going to be a great pickup and a great match for them. But you got to feel really good about what Oregon's doing if that's kind of the direction they're going.
And Justin, both you and I put our RPM picks in for Wisconsin to land Mason Posa. So that is the direction that we think this recruitment is headed. When he makes his decision, he'll choose from Wisconsin, Oregon, and Texas A&M as his top 3. But I think also an important thing to think about if he does, in fact, end up at Wisconsin, he's kind of a pseudo West Coast guy, Southwest. So I feel like he's maybe a guy Oregon could circle back around on if they wanted to down the line. But just to kind of shed a little bit more light on the linebacker picture, there is a guy that I believe is coming into town this weekend that the Ducks are pretty high on, and that's IMG Academy linebacker Gavin Nix out of Bradenton, Florida. And he's got some big schools that are still in the mix here, Justin. Not to get too much into the weekend visit preview. I think we'll have a separate podcast out on that. But I think Noah McHale out of Laverne in California, Laverne Bonita, he is probably the top target for the Ducks at linebacker. I know I have my pick in for Oregon to land him when his time comes to make a decision later this month. But Gavin Nix is a guy that Oregon is still very much involved for and maybe not being discussed about too much here in the 2025 class. Well,
and, to kind of, I guess this really puts a nice bow on what I was just talking about with Posa. Let's just, be overly positive here and put on our homer glasses, if you will. But let's say Oregon manages to land a commitment from Gavin Nix and land a commitment from Noah McHale. I've felt all along they only had room for 2 linebackers in this class. That's not counting maybe an edge or a hybrid. That's a different position. But, Gavin Nix and Noah McHale are true linebackers in the sense of the position. After signing 3 last year, and you really only play 2 linebackers in Dan Lanning's defense, that's again, that's assuming Gavin Nix commits to Oregon and Noah McHale commits to Oregon, which neither of us have predictions in for, either of them to Oregon. We're just maybe assuming.
I have McHale, right?
Oh, you do have McHale. That's right. Mm-hmm. Maybe I do too. I don't remember. Anyways, if we're, kind of homering out and saying Oregon gets those 2 guys, well, I guess at the end of the day, we'd have to say that they probably played it right then. If they were not pushing hard for Posa, who ends up at Wisconsin, and Oregon's able to parlay that into landing Nix and McHale, which were probably the 2 guys you had at the top of the board anyways, they clearly played it right because I didn't think they had room for 3 in this cycle after the 3 they signed last year. So we're kind of in wait and see mode on that, right? We can't really give out a grade and say, oh man, Mason Posa went to Wisconsin. It's a huge miss because potentially this is on the table for Oregon. And, I do feel that Oregon's, I would say at worst in the top 2 for both of these guys. I know they haven't really said that, but that's how I feel where Oregon's at. So if you're in position for both those guys and we know Dan Lanning can close, so you'll end up kind of being, it sounds disrespectful, but you'll be somewhat like Mason Posa who after these 2 guys commit potentially. So I like what they've done at linebacker recruiting. I think Nix fits the system very well. And once again, we talked about this on a recent pod talking about Zaire Addison. you start looking at these Florida guys coming to Oregon, right? You've got Dallas Wilson, you add Zaire Addison, maybe you get Gavin Nix, who's at IMG Academy, and then you're looking at DJ Pickett. That flow SCO that they were all tweeting about really becomes, I mean, that's four guys, and that's four really good football players from Florida that you're able to get on one commit list. Probably helps solidify those four guys all coming, because they'll develop a relationship, and so I could see why Oregon's putting a lot of effort into Gavin Nix, and I think Oregon feels like they're in a good space ahead of his visit.
I definitely feel that way too, Justin. I think Nix has only been out to Oregon once. I don't know if you know that for a fact or not, but I think he's only been out once, which makes his upcoming official visit obviously that much more important. But I think Oregon's done a lot of legwork here. I know that the staff has gone out to see him in the Sunshine State, which, as we all know, is not an easy trip to make. The Ducks haven't historically had a tremendous amount of success recruiting IMG Academy players, but maybe Nix could be in line to change that. And just to another one of your points, I feel like Oregon probably has done enough in recent years to be a bit more selective at linebacker. You look at what they were able to bring in the 2023 class: Dylan Williams, Kamar Matudi, Braden Platt, all three guys that I really, really like. And I think probably at least one of those guys is going to have somewhat of a role right away in 2024, whether that's special teams or maybe in that two deep at linebacker. So this will be an interesting month to continue monitoring, Justin. And I think with Oregon's 2025 class now at 9 verbal commits, a majority of those guys are on offense. We're definitely going to see a defensive focus, I would think, throughout the rest of this month with guys like Trey McNutt expected on campus for their official visits on June 21st. Trey McNutt and DJ Pickett and Jonah Williams, those are all big-time DBs that are scheduled to come in the coming weeks out for their official visit. Like, that June 21st weekend is going to be insane, just in terms of the talent that they're going to have on campus, Justin, as you well know. And man, just like listening to you talk about that Florida movement a bit more, like, I think obviously it's not a reality now. Really won't be a reality until they sign that dotted line in December, if they're able to get those guys. But I really feel like that would probably be rivaling the level that we saw Willie Taggart bring in Florida guys. But that obviously didn't end up happening because he left for the most part, right, with a lot of those guys. So that would just be, I think, another tier, another step in this evolution of Oregon football recruiting in 2024.
And this would definitely supersede that, not strictly because of stars or rankings or anything like that matter. It would supersede that because, at that time, and I don't blame him, Taggart brought in guys he had relationships with that they might not have necessarily needed in that class. It was kind of like, okay, well, let's get guys on the list that bumps up our rankings and make it look good. Dan Lanning doesn't do that. He is heavy on roster management. So I guess my point to that is these four guys potentially that Oregon might get, or whatever the number is, all fill a need, right? I mean, you're talking about Zaire Addison at offensive line, huge position of need. You're talking about Gavin Nix, tremendous player, linebacker. They wanted to sign two. I believe that's two of probably their top 3 or 4 targets right there at linebacker. DJ Pickett, obviously a no-brainer. Dallas Wilson's a 5-star wide receiver. Again, you're filling needs. You're not just getting 4 receivers that are highly ranked out of the state of Florida just because you want to sign dudes from Florida. So, I think we have to take that into account as well, that these are needs, and again, these guys will build relationships. Oregon will get them together. They'll get them out on future visits together, get their families and their moms talking to each other, and just really kind of get that thing gelled as much as you can, because we both know, nobody's given up on Dallas Wilson yet. They're not going to give up on Zaire Addison. If Oregon was able to get DJ Pickett by some miracle, ain't nobody going to give up on him just because he commits in July or whenever he does. So, being able to do that will help. I do believe in Nix's case. I believe he came out for a game in the fall. I think he's been out for an official visit in 24. So I think this will be at least his 3rd visit.
Okay.
And so that's nice spacing there. You give him a chance to see what a game is like. I don't remember if he came out for the spring game. It was pretty
I'm
close
trying
to
to
it, if I
find it
recall
right now.
correctly. Either way, I think you've got nice spacing there and showing him what Eugene's all about in a different way. We might not have logged all the visits. That's on me, for his profile. But either way, obviously this visit this weekend is going to be big for Nick's, as I know we'll talk about him and more of the visitors this coming weekend, which is shaping up to be a phenomenal looking weekend for sure.
Yeah, it's all building towards that 21st weekend. So last weekend was a smaller batch, but important nonetheless. Obviously, two of those guys turned into commits. So you can never overlook a weekend just on the size of the visitors coming in, who were big guys, by the way. But yeah, great stuff, Justin. Breaking down another big commitment for the Ducks in Demetri Manning out of Bellevue, Washington. We also hit on some great stuff looking forward at O-line and in the 2025 class. But any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, I think you and I a couple weeks ago kind of set the table for the month of June, and it's played out almost exactly like we've mentioned. Things would kind of build as the month progressed, and that's what we're seeing. It's definitely not at the peak yet, but you could see this thing's kind of building up as the month progresses. Again, that doesn't mean Oregon's going to land 30 commits by the end of June or into July, but you get a couple knocked off here already. I think we see the potential for there to be at least a few more in the coming weeks. And who knows, maybe the lid blows off a little bit and we get 5, 6, 7 commits, or maybe they just get 4 or 5 really good ones. Who knows? And so we're at least building towards that. And again, like you said, setting the table for the weekends. It's kind of been good last weekend. It's better this coming weekend, and it's best in 2 weekends for those official visitors. So I would definitely stay tuned.
Absolutely. Well, good stuff as always, Justin. It's been fun hopping on the pod with you again. Just a reminder to all our viewers, listeners out there, if you're not already, come check us out at ScoopDuck.com. $1 gets you a month of access. We got an official visit special going on right now. And as you can see, just we're pumping out a bunch of great content. Some recent predictions, 5 stars, 5-star visitors, podcasts, you name it, we have it over there. We got another new writer in Lyndon Heil, who I had on the podcast yesterday. He's getting going and is going to be a regular contributor. So it's an exciting time to go check us out for sure. If you want to find more of Justin, follow him on Twitter/X at JHopkinsSD. If you want to follow me, you can find me at mtorresports on all social media platforms. Subscribe to the ScoopDuck YouTube channel and share the Ducks Dish podcast with your friends, with your family, and with other Duck fans. But until next time, thank you to Justin for stopping by and recording with us. And thank you to you guys for taking some time out of your day to talk some Duck football. And we'll see you in the next episode of the Ducks Dish podcast.